Welcome to Superhumanize. I'm your host, Ariana Summer. Today's guest is someone whose presence ripples far beyond the traditional walls of medicine. Nurse Penny Smith, also known to millions online as @Hospice Nurse Penny, is a nationally certified hospice and palliative care nurse, a social media educator, and the author of the powerful new book, Influencing Death, Reframing Dying for Better Living. With over 20 years of intimate experience at the bedside of the dying and more than 2 million followers drawn to her dark humor, dance, and deeply human wisdom, Penny is helping us reclaim something we have collectively pushed away, our relationship with death. In a world obsessed with youth and longevity, her message is a radical invitation to soften our fear, to educate ourselves, and to begin to see death not as the opposite of life, but as its mirror. This conversation is especially meaningful to me. Earlier this year, I lost my father. And while I live immersed in the health and wellness world and explore every corner of longevity and life extension, I know that none of it is complete without the courage to look at our own endings. Penny and I speak about what a good death means, how to support our loved ones and ourselves through the mystery of dying, and what she has witnessed that suggests there is more beyond the veil. If you have ever whispered the question, what happens when we die? Or if you simply want to live more fully, this episode is for you.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Penny, welcome to the Superhumanize podcast. I am really grateful that you made time for us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, absolutely. Penny, one of the first things I noticed and loved about your work is how unafraid you are to speak plainly about death. You bring dark humor, joy, and very straight talk to a space that many of us still avoid out of fear or just plain old discomfort. And we just talked about it before I hit record. I live in Los Angeles right now. I'm actually using our clinic, Gateway Clinics, as an office. And LA is one of these vortexes of where longevity is a kind of religion. And as someone who has deeply immersed herself into biohacking and wellness, I know firsthand how often the conversations about life extension avoids the truth of death entirely. And I'm curious, Penny, what do you think happened to us as individuals and also as a society where we avoid facing death directly?
I really think it has a lot to do with the advancements in medical technology. The ability to keep people alive longer makes people want to live longer. And putting people in the hospitals to die, they used to be in their home with their family when they died. And so we put them in the hospital and we do all these treatments to try to keep them alive as long as we can. And we've tucked it away in there and just avoid talking about it. Death is seen as a failure in the medical community. Doctors aren't taught how to deal with death. They're taught how to cure people. So it's just become such a taboo topic because nobody wants to talk about it. So that makes it a taboo topic that nobody wants to talk about. It's like a vicious cycle, really. And because we don't talk about it, it's very unknown, and we're always going to fear the unknown. And that's what creates fear and anxiety around death. So people just really want to avoid thinking about it, talking about it, and think that it'll maybe, I don't know, not happen. Which, of course, we know is not going to happen. It is going to happen.
Exactly. And I'm curious, in your many years in this realm of work and your many encounters, when you meet with someone, family members, or also the individual who is in hospice, and you notice that there's really a kind of a constriction and a fear and a not an open flow of talking about this, how, in your own experience, what is it that in the easiest way opens the conversation up?
First, you have to allow people space. You have to let them sit with those feelings because you are going to be, I always say I'm death positive, but if somebody told me, guess what, you're going to die in 6 months, I would be also, terrified because I don't want to leave this life. I have a lot to live for. So you have to allow people to sit with it for a minute. And then after a while, usually they'll adjust. And if they don't, and they want to talk about what their fears are, what I have found is that most people are not concerned about the actual death, the actual not being here, the what happens after we die. It's what's going to happen during that process. How will that be? Will I suffer? And what's going to happen to the people that I love that I leave behind? That's a big fear that people have. And those things I'm able to work with. I can talk to them about what's going to happen during the dying process. I can explain that process to them. I can tell them how we will help them with the things that might come up for them that could create suffering. And I can reassure them that hospice will provide grief counseling for their family members at no charge for up to a year after their death. And that's something that usually brings them a lot of peace and relief around dying. But it is important to just first, it's normal. It's normal for people to be afraid. You have to let them live in that space and work through that and to reassure that it's normal. It's normal for you to feel afraid.
So what I hear here also, Penny, is that what's incredibly important is to be fully present with what is, whether it's the individual who is about to transition, about to die, or the loved ones, and not to suppress anything. I think as a society, we have so much learned to normalize suppressing, right? The talking about it, even the grief. This is wonderful. I had no idea that you can get grief counseling for up a year after. That's incredible, because so often I feel people are just expected to function within days or weeks. I myself lost my father in March of this year, and I very much consciously went into full-on grieving for 10 days, and also actually made use of what we offer here at the clinic, ketamine IV therapy, which was like a rocket ship, not to speed it up, but the depth of the grief I was able to experience, and also having the support. I have heard from many people that they don't even have the support. People don't know how to talk to people who are grieving before the death of a loved one, or it's the individual grieving that they know they're going to leave this life, or after the death. And I'm really curious, Penny, how does the grief counseling look like? It's probably very tailor-made to the individual, I'm guessing, but is there an arc that you follow?
So it is tailor-made to the individual. And I also want to add that this isn't just my hospice agency that offers this. It's a Medicare requirement for the hospice benefit. And if you want to be a Medicare-certified hospice agency, you have to follow the Medicare rules. And it is a requirement for every hospice agency to provide this. And it really does, it's individualized to the person's needs. And it's the same with hospice. Medicare is very person-centered. They want to make sure that whatever we do is meeting the needs of the person. So that might be infrequent phone calls, or it might be frequent phone calls. It might be mailings. It might be group sessions. It might be one-to-one in-person sessions. It really depends on what the needs are for that person that's receiving the counseling.
And I imagine that a big part also is, it's, as I said before, presence, but also trust. There must be really trust when somebody's coming into your life and supporting you in one of the hardest times of your life. And something that struck me about you, Penny, and what for me immediately built a kind of trust, even not knowing you, is how you shared so openly about your past, whether it's online with your huge social media following, whether it's in your beautiful book. You shared about addiction, pain, even jail time, and how those chapters shaped the caregiver you became. And you wrote, I'm going to paraphrase this, that you wouldn't change a thing, and that wading through and overcoming a lot of the crap that was your young life, that actually helped you who you became and who you are today. And really curious to learn from you, how did these hardest parts of your past become your inner compass, and how do they inform you as the caretaker that you are?
For one thing, just being able to come out of all of that to survive, not only to survive, but to thrive and succeed, those things just it made me realize that I'm a strong person, that I'm able to do these things. And as far as how I am as a caretaker, it helps me to be with people at this vulnerable time in their life. And not everybody is a wonderful human being at the end of their life, but I'm able to support them without judgment because I've been down this pathway. So I have no judgment about people when they're at the end of their life. It doesn't matter to me what they did during their life. I just want to be able to care for them without judgment because I know that for the most part, people are good. They do bad things sometimes. I did bad things too, but I'm not a bad person. I just did bad things. So I feel like most people are inherently good. And not only does it help me to care for the person, it helps me to be able to be with families that are maybe really dysfunctional, not getting along, not being the greatest at caring for their person, understanding that there's this little piece of time that I'm with them, and then there's a whole lifetime ahead of that I wasn't a part of. And so I can't judge what's going on in this household. I just have to work to the best of my ability with what's currently unfolding.
Oh gosh, and what a beautiful gift to have somebody like yourself who has this perspective in such an intense time of the loved ones and also the individual that's dying. You just said not everybody's a wonderful person when they die. And I'm sure this is not one size fits all, but in general, for you and having this vast experience in the field, if you encounter somebody who's really just ornery and mean, are there certain things that have been crucial in helping build the bridges and giving this individual the support, even if there is some resistance or they're just not in a good space, whether it's just in that time of their lives or whether it was all their lives?
It's just being able to see the humanity in people and
Mm.
see through that. Now, I'm not going to say there's never been anybody who I said, I don't want to take care of that person or I don't want to deal with that family. There are situations like that. But sometimes, and I'm not the only hospice nurse that will say this,
Oh,
sometimes my favorite patients have been the crustiest, most orneriest patients. The
yeah.
families didn't want anything to do with them. And yet there's just something endearing about them that just draws you in. There's been so many situations like that. And it's interesting because I'm retired. I don't know if I just retired from my job 2 weeks ago. Prior to
Mm.
that, I was doing quality assurance for a hospice agency. And we would often have what we call a complex case review, and we bring in subject matter experts. So I'm the quality expert, I'm the regulatory expert. They bring me in. We have a meeting to talk about families and what's going on with patients. And there's been so many times when we have these patients that are the most challenging, and you listen to the story and you're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to deal with this? And then the nurse will be like, but I really love him. There's just something about him that's just so endearing. And it's just the ability to see the humanity in people and to, again, to not have judgment, to understand this is the worst time of their life, the
Mhm.
worst. It's not going to get any worse than this.
Mhm.
And just being able to just have a little tiny compassion for them.
Yeah.
It's just something I think you have to have it in you. I'm not the, believe me, I am not the only hospice nurse that has a past like mine. I know many hospice nurses that have gone through the same kind of things that I went through. And I do think it just builds our character and our ability to deal with this kind of stuff.
Yes, and compassion, non-judgment, and at the same time also being able to hold your own boundaries, whether it's in a situation where you have to say, I am not dealing with this, or also to not let it flow into your life in a way where it depletes you. Honestly think from my heart, we are so lucky as a society, as humanity, to have individuals like yourself who in one of the most crucial phases of our lives can support us, have given support. And whether it's by the work you did and now retired, I'm pretty sure you still have a lot of things you're focusing on, whether it's your garden or, I mean, your social media. You've cultivated a massive global following, millions, by meeting people where they are in scroll mode, often late at night, maybe looking for distraction and dopamine hits. And yeah, you use that space to teach them how to face the ultimate thing we're all trying to avoid, death. And I'm curious, Penny, what has surprised you the most about how people respond to your content? And yeah.
A few things have been surprising to me. One is that when I started off, I had death anxiety when I was younger, severe death anxiety, and I thought it was just me. And so being on social media, it helped me to realize that it's normal and I'm not the only person that suffered from death anxiety, and that I thought that the reason I got over my death anxiety was through my work as a hospice nurse. So I had no concept of any afterlife. I wasn't raised with religion. And my fear was, what if there's nothing after we die? And then it's just nothing. So that was my fear. Working in hospice, I started seeing people having deathbed visioning, where they're seeing the deceased spirits, like spirits of the deceased people that they loved and spirits of deceased pets that they had. And so I started to really firmly believe, that there is an afterlife. And I thought that's what helped with the death anxiety. As I got onto social media and I started talking about this more, and people started watching my videos and saying, I don't have any death anxiety anymore, I realized it's really more about acceptance. It's about accepting that we're going to die. It's about not being afraid to talk about it. That's what takes the fear away from it. So that was surprising. It was a little surprising that people have responded so well to the dark humor. A 15-second video clip of me dancing around and pointing to words can get the message across. Like, people will say, I get what you said. That makes sense to me. Thank you for that lesson. That has been surprising to me. Not anymore. I've been doing it so long now. It's surprising to me when people don't like the dark humor. I'm like, what's the matter with you? Don't...
Exactly. I love it too. Yeah, and I think it also, whether somebody resonates with dark humor or not, but I think even just witnessing it and in that context is a permission slip to feel and in ways that, and think in ways that are not pre-prescribed, right? There's a freedom in that. So whether I laugh at your dark humor or not, I do. But even if I wouldn't, it shows me it's all right to color outside of the lines. Yeah, it's all right to just come with what arises. I do not need to think or function feeling-wise in a certain way. And what you just shared, Penny, about the deathbed visions, you share about that in your chapter, the woo-woo stuff, like the dying, seeing their deceased loved ones, and you said also you've not been raised with religion, but you believe we continue in some way. Was there something particular amongst all these experiences that connected you with that belief? Is there maybe a story that you carry real close when somebody asks you, is there really something after?
It's a culmination of lots of those experiences where people were telling me that they could see their person that had the patient whose room was next to the nurse's station, and he was yelling, and his wife had died a year before him. And he was yelling, and I walked in the room and he's yelling, Ingrid, and he's looking in the corner of the room and he's just crying. Tears are coming down his face. He's crying. And I said, was Ingrid your wife? And he said, yes. And I said, is she coming to get you? And he said, yes, but not today, tomorrow. And it was like so real to me that he said that. I was like, but not today, tomorrow. And I thought, well, that's specific. Like, not only does he see her, there's a connection there. Like, she's communicating to him that she's going to come and get him, but not today. So that was something. And then my dad's death and my dad coming to me after he died, that was like sealed the deal. Now, at that point, I had been a hospice nurse for 5 years. And this was even before I saw that patient do that. I had seen deathbed visioning before that. My dad died 5 years into my hospice nursing, and he came to me after he died in the form of energy. And that was definitely like, okay, yes, that's for real. This is for real.
Yes. Oh gosh, there are such incredible stories. I shared another occasion in this podcast. Actually, I spoke with, you were on their podcast, Johanna Lunn.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I had shared also with her the day my father died. He lived in Germany. Just a few hours before he passed, I had this crow hopping up to the glass windows, actually here at the clinic behind the counter. And this crow hopped up, and then it had to turn its head to look at me and just looked at me. And then it hopped off. One of our nurses who was here, we commented on it because it was so odd. I just knew in that moment, I knew my father is going to pass. And that's what transpired. And I also know from family and friends who had loved ones visit them, also in a form of energy, tinkling crystals. Actually, my husband and my mother-in-law, and neither of them were at that time into anything like that. And they recall it so vividly. And it's fascinating. There's more than we know and than conventional science can explain, even though science is catching up to spirituality, thank goodness. Your book, Penny, is also full of, so not only the spiritual, but also full of fiercely practical advice. Things like they're not eating because they're dying, or my favorite, saying the word death won't cause it to happen. So let's talk about this. It's not like if you say death, you're going to cause it. And
Right.
yeah, and still, I remember that being ingrained in me in the past. Don't bring it up around somebody sick and terminally ill. And one of the concepts that also really struck me in preparing for this conversations was there's this Swedish practice called death cleaning, of clearing your belongings before you die to ease the burden on your loved ones. And I'm curious, what do you think about this particular idea? And what are some of maybe other meaningful, surprising ways you've seen people prepare for their own death?
First of all, my husband and I were just at the lawyer's office this morning getting our updated wills signed because I do want to make sure that I'm preparing for that. That's very important to me. I had a patient once who was writing her own obituary, and I was just fascinated by that. And I recently was speaking at a conference where another social media creator was also speaking, and she reads obituaries, and she did the presentation on obituaries and was saying how we should all be writing our obituaries. And now anytime I'm out in the garden and I'm watering my flowers and stuff, I'm always thinking, she says, write bullet points. Let's write bullet points. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. And I keep thinking I need to write these things down. Like, this was my favorite flower and I don't like these. And, that I think that just being able to leave behind these pieces of yourself for your family members can help them so much. And yeah, I've seen that. I had a patient once who was with her sister going through the photo albums and picking out all the photos. And she said, I want to have control over what pictures are shown of me after I die. I want my memorial to be what I want it to look like. And so for years now, my sister and I have had a rule about when we take pictures, if we don't like the picture, we get to say, no, that picture is a veto. You can't delete it. You can't use that picture. And actually, I haven't really stuck to that because I have a picture over here of her and me that she's not crazy about. So we've talked about this for years. And just those are things that I've seen people doing, is just planning for what kind of funeral they want, I love the obituary thing because I think that's really important. For me, it's my social media videos. I have 3 kids, and each one is responsible for a piece of my social media. So, like, my son has got YouTube and Facebook. My daughter has TikTok. My other daughter has Instagram. They all know that they're supposed to be posting after I die. They're going to post something about me. So, at one point, I even had a video that I made on TikTok, and it was in my drafts, basically saying, if you're watching this video, I've died. This is what I want you to know about me. And then I deleted it. I think I intended on making a new one because I was in my pajamas when I made that one. And I haven't made a new one yet. I need to do that.
What a beautiful idea, Penny. I love, yes, to record a message as you're still on this earth plane, which again, it's your life, it's your death. You get to write it, to narrate it. And again, another wonderful permission slip for others to see, yes, this is possible. This is mine. This is part of my life. And what a genius idea to write your own obituary. Of course. Who else should write it? I have never heard about that, but it makes total sense. Or at the very least, leave your loved ones some things that are important for you that you'd mentioned. Because I remember when I didn't write the obituary for my father, but I did hold a little speech about his life. And I remember when I focused on writing it, I really was also focusing on not just my truth to speak as a daughter, but what is his truth? What was fundamental? What fundamentally him, his inner architecture, and how it extended into the world, and to do justice with that. And not just the things that I knew and experienced with him, because he had a vast and rich life before me, and also aside being my father. So that is a beautiful idea with the obituary. Yeah. Oh,
My agency also had a program where they would interview, they would have two people, they'd have the patient and then somebody close to the patient, a friend or a family member would interview them and they would record it. And then they would put it in the National Archive, Library Archive, and have this just recording existing of this person talking about their life. It was really cool.
yes. Oh, that reminds me of, this was a few years ago when I had one of the last really in-depth conversations with my dad. We had a loving but not very easy relationship. So this was a conversation where we actually really spoke with each other, not at each other, sitting in the garden in Germany. And I had a hunch. He had Parkinson's. So I had a hunch. I recorded the conversation when it was an hour, 20-minute, just beautiful conversation about life, about him, me, his past, just so many different facets, our family. And I'm so glad I did that, because the night when I heard, because the time difference also in Germany, I heard he had passed, I listened to that. And that's another beautiful idea, Penny. And I'm curious, what do you think about the following? Now, of course, with AI and with all kinds of modern technology, we have the possibility to create these avatars of our loved ones via voice recordings or video recordings and put them together. So I see a lot of different sides to this. My main thing is with consent also. Is there consent? I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about that. I don't know. I think we need to let people die and be dead, and it's okay to let their memory live on. But when you're creating memories that aren't even really authentically them, I don't know. I struggle with that.
Yeah.
I struggle with that. I'm really grateful for the pictures that I have of my dad and the memories that I have. And then we made a beautiful DVD of for his memorial of videos that we had. We put it to music. It's beautiful. I love to watch it. But I think it would just be weird to have some kind of image that looks like him and sounds like him, but really isn't him. I think it's just another way of avoiding death.
Yeah. Yeah, I have mixed emotions there too, Penny, where, and again, consent comes in. If the person who died gave their consent to that prior to death, because maybe I'm thinking about if somebody who really loved me told me, I would really like to have that after you die, it would give me comfort and help me over the grieving period, then I may think, okay, let's do that. But to not have the consent and then keep this avatar alive, I don't know how I feel about that. And also, yes, if it's avoidance of death, I think to forego the true grieving process, it's something doesn't feel right about that. And yeah, anyhow, I haven't formed a completed opinion on that. It's just something
I haven't either. Yeah, I haven't either. I think it's important too when you're talking about consent, because what that makes me think about is medical aid in dying. Medical aid in dying is not legal for people with dementia because they can't consent. When they're in that last 6 months of life, they're no longer decisional and they can't consent. So I'm always saying, why can't they consent before they get to that point? Before they are not able to make decisions for themselves, can't they sign this consent and say, I want this? And somebody said, because you don't know if that's going to change for them. And so, what if you do sign consent for somebody to make an avatar of you? You don't know what they're going to do with that. And what if somebody gets their hands on it and the next thing you know, you're on an OnlyFans taking your clothes off after you've died? You know, your avatar is doing all kinds of things that you didn't consent to because you didn't know what you were consenting to. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm very much on the fence. I feel, again, it's just avoiding death. And grief is something that we have to learn to live with. It never goes away. It's nonlinear. It never goes away. We learn to live with it. And I think, I don't know, I really like what you're doing with ketamine. I think that's a kind of a better pathway to helping somebody through grief. I can't see how it would be therapeutic to create an avatar of somebody who has died to try to get somebody through the grief of the death.
Yes.
You're just postponing it. You're just bringing that. I think there's other ways that we want our dead to live on. We want them to be alive in our memories. But to that degree, it just feels too much. And that, again, that's based on, I really don't know a whole lot about it. I don't know about AI very much. I'm learning about that. I just posted a video that was an AI picture of my grandmother, and people went crazy in the comment section telling me that I'm a horrible person, that AI is awful, it's bad for the environment, it consumes energy, it wastes water. And I'm like, water? How does water have anything to do with AI? So clearly I know nothing about AI. I'm going to have to look into that.
Oh my goodness. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly about social media sometimes. And again, it's just opinions, but then they come
Right.
in barrage, especially if you have such a big following. I'm curious, tying back to our conversation just a couple of minutes ago, what are your thoughts on the assisted death that has become legalized in quite a few places? If somebody's in full coherence and they decide, I'm in too much pain, physically, mentally, or whatnot, and I want to choose how I die, and this is how I want to do it.
Yeah, I'm 100% for it. I voted for it in my state years ago. I'd been a hospice nurse for a couple of years when it was on the ballot. I'm all for it. I think people deserve to have autonomy over their bodies. I've seen hospice does a good job of helping to relieve suffering, but there are some situations where we just aren't able to do anything, especially when you're talking about existential suffering. And people have the right to do that. And I also know of many situations where they felt like they couldn't access it because it is legal in my state, but for whatever reason, it was unaffordable for a while, or their family didn't agree with it, or whatever reason, they felt like they couldn't access it, and they ended up dying by suicide in another way. And it was horrible. It was horrible for the family. It was traumatic. It was traumatic for the first responders. It was, one guy didn't even die, and then he ended up in the ICU on life support, and the family had to terminate the life support. And so I really think that it should be federally legal. I think it should be affordable, accessible. And even though the whole consent thing comes into play, I do think there should be an avenue for people who have dementia to be able to pursue it. Right now, the only thing somebody with dementia can really do is to do voluntary stop eating and drinking, which is called bedside. And they are leaving so much life on the table when they have to do that, because they have to be able to be cognitively intact enough to stop eating and drinking. So that's their only option. And I just feel like they should be able to designate somebody to be their champion when the time comes and allow them to go through this. But we're just not there yet. It's not even legal in every state.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said, Penny, and the sovereignty in deciding not only how we live, but also how we die. I honestly think that's a birthright, and we should all be able to exercise it. We've also had talks with a large hospital network with regard to bringing ketamine into hospice, because the experiences individuals have, especially not only related to pain or trauma, but the specific fear of dying. There is such a sense of peace that comes in, and that alone, how that also affects the loved ones. And then also in the therapy to make it accessible for loved ones who may have a very hard time letting go and grieving. For me personally, ketamine helped me immensely with my grief around my father's death. Not because it suppressed it but to the contrary, I was able to go so deep within 2 sessions I also took 10 days full on to just grieve and be in my bed and do nothing and just feel. But particularly these 2 ketamine sessions, I went so deep in my grief, so deep in my memory. And it was like, I could have not grieved as profoundly, as deeply, as fully in months, maybe not even a year. Anyhow, I think there are ways to support people who are dying and also grieving and normalize it, make it accessible, that are so important.
I love that you talk about that you immersed yourself in the grief, because that's really what my family did too. And I do think that is the key to being able to move through that grief and become functional again and to live with it. That is exactly what we did. We hunkered down at my mom's house on mattresses on the floor. We were all together for 3 weeks. We really grieved together. And I think that when people avoid that grief, they're just postponing it again. They're just putting it off. They're just not able to move through it as easily because they're just not wanting to think about it and they just avoid it. We have a hospice agency here in Washington that is doing some work with ketamine. And I believe they're doing stuff in Canada with it as well. Yeah, I like that a lot. My thing, what I want someday, if I'm lucky enough to be dying a natural death on hospice, I want nitrous. I don't know why we don't use nitrous.
Tell me more about it. What is the effect?
Laughing gas. When you go to the dentist and you get nitrous oxide, and it's just, it just makes you so happy. And I always think that's what I would like if I was dying. And I don't think there's a lot of hospices that utilize that. And I think that would be amazing. I think there's a lot of work that could be done around dying to make it a better experience. But again, so many people don't want to talk about it or think about it.
I respect so much the incredible work you're doing, Penny. It's truly a calling. And there's something also that really struck me in a very good way. One of the paradoxes I felt in your book, and also just talking with you now, is that the closer you are to death, the more vibrantly you seem to live. You write with joy, you garden, you dance, you make people laugh while you teach them about dying. So what has death taught you about how to live?
Again, it's just, we don't know. We really don't know what's after this life. And I can say I do believe that there's something. I think it does have to do with energy, but who knows what it is. And so as far as I know, get one chance to live on this earth. And I've been with so many people who didn't get to live as long as me that I really just appreciate that I am able to get old and that I may only ever maybe there's something great after this life and I don't know that. So I appreciate being able to be in my garden. That makes me so happy. And I don't know if I'll ever get that again. And I also don't know if I'll ever get that again a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because there's actually things that are worse than death. There's debilitating disease that can prevent you from doing the things that bring you joy. And so it's not even just death that's taught me that. It's the whole dying part. It's watching people have diseases that rob them of their lives while they're still here. That helps me to just be able to embrace every single day and be so thankful that I am able to do those things at this point, even though like I complain, I get aches and pains now because I'm getting so old. As long as I can keep doing what I love, I just have so much gratitude for that, knowing that there are so many people who don't get that. They die young or they're alive for a while without even being able to do that stuff, and then they die. I used to be, whenever I got sick, when I was still doing patient care, whenever I got sick, I'd think to myself, this is what it's like for my patients, except for they know they're never going to get better again. They're never going to feel better again. And just having that knowledge, it just makes you just appreciate what you get when you get it.
Penny, I'd love to learn from you, and I'm sure there's people in the audience who maybe they're facing the passing of a loved one. They have to make end of life decisions for them, or maybe they themselves are in that position. And as a layperson myself, looking at the world of hospice, if I had to look at that now, it would probably feel very overwhelming. And you have worked across so many different settings. You've done the home case management, inpatient education, and also what you mentioned before, the quality review. What is it that someone should look for when they're looking for a good hospice provider? Are there any signs that would show that this particular hospice program is excellent, or are there things we should mind? Are there things that could be seen as red flags that a layperson might not normally recognize, and what would they be?
Well, first of all, I love the way you put that, because you are letting people know that they get to choose their hospice provider. And a lot of people don't know that you can choose your hospice provider. You don't have to go with one that you are referred to. You can self-refer to any hospice, and you can choose your hospice provider. There is a Medicare website, medicare.gov-care compare. And if you go there and you put in your zip code and you choose hospice for the specialty, it will bring up all the Medicare-certified hospice agencies that serve your area. That's the first thing. You need to have a Medicare-certified hospice agency. They're held to a higher standard. The second thing is they're going to show you quality scores on there. There's a star rating, so you can look for the higher star rating. I am a big proponent of nonprofit hospices. I'm not crazy about for-profits. I always steer people to nonprofit. I just think they are going to live the mission better. They're not trying to make money. They're just really trying to care for people at the end of their life. And then when you interview the hospice, and I do have a website, hospicenursepenny.com, and I have interview questions on there, and I've got the link for Care Compare as well as some other links that are great resources. There are certain things that you can ask them. And one of the things I always say is ask them how often you can expect the team to visit, particularly the nurse. How often will the nurse visit? And if they give you a patent answer, once a week, once every 2 weeks, that's a red flag, because really what they should be saying is it depends on what's happening with you, because we are going to build a plan of care around your needs. And so if I need to come every day, I'll be here every day. And if I don't need to come here as often, then I won't be. So I think it's really important people know that the plan of care is really about what their needs are.
And there are so many more options. I think I also read in one of your resources that you can choose a hospice with aromatherapy or other components of care that I would have never thought that's possible, that's even available.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's many more things you can ask them. You can ask them what kind of a hospital bed do they provide, because there's the old-fashioned kind that you've got to crank up, and there are the kinds that have the remote that'll raise and lower the bed. And that's going to be optimal, especially if you're an elderly person taking care of your spouse. Or like you say, the aromatherapies, what kind of comfort therapies do they offer? There's many things that you want to know when you're seeking out a hospice. But really the most important thing is, how often can I expect the team to visit? What'll happen if something goes sideways after hours? Is there a nurse that can come out and see me? They are required to have a nurse 24/7 available by phone, but can they make a visit in the middle of the night? How long will it take them to get there in the middle of the night? There's so many things around choosing a hospice, but going to that Medicare website is really key to finding a Medicare certified nonprofit hospice agency and seeing what kind of quality ratings they have.
Excellent. Thank you, Penny, for that advice. And if you could stand in front of every person who will one day sit at the bedside of someone they love, which is pretty much everyone, right? But in your hospice family, what is one thing you wish you could teach them before that day comes?
Is to talk about what's happening openly, talk about the fact the person is dying. So many times the person is dying and they really want to talk about it, but they don't want to bum their family out, but their family's going to be bummed out anyway because it is what it is. And the family doesn't want to steal the hope from the person that's dying, which is impossible. You can change hope. You're not taking hope away. To talk about what is happening is the best way to have a good death experience for everybody involved, to know that you've done everything for them that they would want you to do for them and not have any regrets for how you cared for them.
Indeed, Penny. And I think what you just mentioned, what you just touched upon, that so many of us, I include myself in this, would have, not anymore now, but would have tended to, everything's going to be okay, instead of actually acknowledging what's happening and doing it in a supportive and in a loving way, in a present way, that actually lessens the possibility for someone to have a good death.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just allowing the person who's dying to choose their own path and to accept whatever they choose, and to not be, don't give up, you got to fight, you got to keep fighting. Or as you say, it's no, you're going to be okay, don't talk like that. Even those kind of benign sounding words, oh, don't talk like that, is enough to really hamper the death experience, because you're just shutting them down when they really want to be able to talk about it.
Yes. And Penny, you offer so many great resources, and this was such a beautiful conversation. I'm really so grateful we got to connect. For people who would want to learn more about what you do, what you offer, where can they find you? Where can they connect?
So as I said, I do have a website. It's hospicenursepenny.com. There's lots of resources on there. I am on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook at Hospice Nurse Penny on all of my social media platforms. And I did write a book, Influencing Death, Reframing Dying for Better Living. And it's available wherever books are sold online. And there are links to that on my website as well.
And it is a fantastic book. We're going to make sure to put
Thank you.
into the show notes. And for those of you listening, in the presence of Nurse Penny, we are reminded that death is not the end of the conversation. It's the place where a different kind of listening begins. And her stories invite us not just to prepare for dying, but to participate in it more fully, with the eyes open, with our hearts open and soft, and with our courage steady. And Penny, you've said so much about what is normal in the dying process, and yet how we have forgotten to recognize it. And in remembering that, perhaps we're also remembering something deeper, that death does not take us away from meaning, it actually brings us towards it. And I hope that this episode may serve as a gentle companion, whether you're navigating loss, whether you're sitting with someone in their final moments, or whether you're simply beginning to wonder what it means to live well by actually befriending the end. And Nurse Penny, as you're showing us with your stories, with your garden and your beautiful pink hair, death may come, but so does color and laughter and grace. And sometimes I feel the most powerful thing we can do is to name what's happening and to say, that's normal and we're not alone.
Absolutely.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.